Exclusive.
Hey, RedEye, this is Joel Edgerton. I wrote and directed The Gift, opening August 7th.
You do such a good job of making the house feel like unsettling and claustrophobic in The Gift. How scared are you when you're home alone? Or where's someone where you are and you kind of feel like you're looking over your shoulder?
Well, I used to feel incredibly scared when I was a kid of where I lived. And it was like a beautiful place during the day and I had the best time. But when night fell, because it was kind of a big, long house and I was so far away from my parents. And there was a lot of glass like there is in the house in our film. And I remember that terrible feeling when I realized that when you're inside a house and the lights are on, that anybody who's outside can see you very well and you can't see them at all.
So did you hide under a blanket or sleep on your parents' floor? How did you deal with that?
I used to actually climb up into a cupboard and sleep on a shelf. And I had this big cupboard. And I remember my father finding me asleep on the top shelf because I also would have these terrible dreams about the house. You know, one of them it was so weird, I haven't thought about this in years, that these floodwaters would come and flood the house. And so I had to sleep on this shelf. I thought if I got up there, then I'd be away from the water. But I used to also look behind doors and under my bed. Every night before I went to sleep, I'd go to my room, look behind the door, look under the bed, check all the areas where anybody could be lurking.
But as long as no one was there, you were fine? Or were you like, they could be, maybe I just didn't find them?
Yeah, then maybe they're just hiding better than, they know that I'm going to be looking. But then I would go to bed and have these terrible dreams. It's weird. You asked me that. I haven't thought about that in years.
Huh.
I'd never look behind a door or under a bed now.
What freaks you out now?
Oh, spiders freak me out. Yeah, spiders freak me out.
Me too.
And you know, like, and also what freaks me out too, the things that people can do, and the kind of people that freak me out, meth heads.
Why that in particular?
Because they're very unpredictable.
Have you encountered meth heads?
Yeah.
Where?
Well, just in the cities. Sydney's got quite a lot of them now. And I've shot in Vancouver before, and that was a pretty sort of treacherous place. But just every now and then, particularly in cities, you see people, and they, you know, I think it's a very sad drug, and I think it's a very, you know, it's a big conversation actually, but it creates a very unpredictable person.
Sure. Well, you said last night that you're more afraid of like the villain that is the human, someone who could really exist. Was there ever like a movie monster that freaked you out, and what do you remember of that experience?
Oh yeah, look, the ones that really freaked me out early on, and to the point where I almost couldn't watch anymore, were the early staple horror movies. You know, the first couple of Friday the 13th. Halloween terrified me. And Evil Dead. Evil Dead, of course, was more of a kind of a force of nature that then entered as a kind of a ghost spirit or whatever. But that whole, like, remember the old, I'm okay now, you can let me up from under the basement. Do you ever remember that?
Yeah.
Terrifying. But those movies used to freak me out. But talking about humans being villains, you know, for some reason I got access to the Charles Bronson movies that they were revenge stories. I can't remember what they were.
Like Death Wish, that kind of thing?
Death Wish, the Death Wish trilogy. And they freaked me out because that was like human beings, like guys that were in gangs, like doing bad things. And that used to terrify me. You know, the idea of like people abducting people and doing bad things. That used to freak me out.
What's the biggest lesson you learned helming your first feature directorial effort? Was there anything that happened on set where you're like, oh, well, I'll do that better next time, or just kind of the biggest challenge?
There were a lot of things I learned. You know, I thought I'd taken a lot of lessons from other directors and brought them in, you know, like being super prepared and really knowing the material, making sure that I knew exactly what I wanted and how I wanted things to be, but being open to other things. One thing I really realized, and it's so weird because I'm an actor, is it suddenly dawned on me in certain days of the film just how great actors are at problem solving. So that I didn't need to have all of the answers. I didn't need to prescribe the way a scene should play. I didn't need to do everything. I needed to come with my own good ideas to fall back on. But it's amazing when you get 2 or 3 great actors in a room and you're all on the same page and you all know what direction you're heading in. Just how many great ideas and suggestions and things that they throw up that you wouldn't be able to receive if you tried to take control of every situation.
I think something that's sort of clever about making people uneasy about this movie is the simple fact that, like, an adult named Gordo, I think it's like, well, that's kind of a childhood nickname, isn't it? Do you think it's necessary, like, people who go by Mikey, Davey, Timmy as a kid, is it weird if you don't hang that up when you become an adult?
It perhaps is, yeah. I mean, it may also be a little bit of an Australianism, but, you know, almost everybody in Australia has a name that ends up being abbreviated.
Were you Jolo?
Well, it's interesting. If your name's Rob, like Robert, you'd become Robbo.
Really?
Yeah. Or if your name's Barry, you'd become Baz. So this is almost like you could run a name by every single Australian, and they will tell you the exact way it would get abbreviated. Joel is not so much. With a name like mine, you would add a sound to it. You become like Jolie or something. Jolie. But yeah, I think you're right. There's something kind of weird and innocent about Gordo as much as there's something kind of unsettling and sinister about him as a character. But, you know, it was actually a really tricky challenge for me as an actor within this to kind of go, well, where do you pitch a character like this? Because, you know, in terms of the whole construct of the genre of where he sits in this thriller, you know, we know what he ends up doing and we know where he gets to, and we have to believe all of it. So how do you pitch a character like that you go, we get that he's weird and we get that he doesn't really belong with this couple in this house, but if it's too much, if it's too bizarre, if it's too unusual, you wouldn't believe them even opening the door to him in the first place. So that was the tricky part for me.
How much do you think kind of everyday bullying goes on among adults? Can you think of a time when you've encountered someone who you felt like was trying to, like, casually manipulate you, bully you like that?
Yeah, you feel... I feel it a lot with men, you know, like, you know, I guess it's within a gender thing a lot. I think gender politics bullying is a different thing and takes on other interpretations and sometimes a lot more sinister things. But say between, you know, men and the way men relate to each other in the workplace and kind of name calling and asserting themselves over each other, I always refer to it as like when one man rubs his beard in another man's face. It's like, I'm going to prove to you who's boss. Take that, you know. It happens all the time.
This morning I was on the train and some guy had his bag on the seat and I was trying to be like, hey, can I sit there? And he was pretending they didn't hear me. But then I was like, hey, excuse me, do you mind if I sit there? And he picked up his bag and then got up and left. Victory, right?
Yeah, you got him, mate. You schooled him.
I was nice about it, but it's like, come on, dude.
Yeah. It's like, it's so weird.
No reason to be rude that way.
Yeah, I don't feel like, you know, some people's response to... Well, here's the thing, too, is I often find I judge other people's reactions to me or the way I, you know, end up having an interaction with a stranger. And what you don't know sometimes is what's going on for that other person.
True.
You know? They might be having a terribly shitty day. They might interpret you a different way. They might actually be fearful of you in a way that you're fearful of them. You know, I was like... I remember my dad, because we, you know, grew up in Australia and there's snakes and all sorts of weird animals over there that are going to bite you. And I remember when the first time I heard someone say, oh, that snake's more scared of you than you are of it. And I was like, that was just a hard concept to wrap my head around. And I think, you know, with interactions with other people, it's often good for you to be mindful of the fact that that person has their own stuff going on.
That's a good point.
But it's also a reason to also be cautious of them, because you don't know how someone's going to react to you in a bad way.
You're right. Your helicopter noises in the movie are so impressive. Can you do any other cool sound effects with your mouth like that?
Yeah, I can do a good baby.
Let's hear it.
I'll see if I can do it. It might be a little dry. I'm going to have to cover my mouth here. How's
That's
that for you?
good.
Yeah, that's about the only one.
Can you either quote a movie you love, tell me the worst pickup line you've ever heard, or do the best impersonation you have of somebody?
Oh, God.
Just one of
Wait,
those.
what were all those again?
Quote a movie you love, worst pickup line you've ever heard, or best impersonation. Just quickly, if
The
one.
worst pickup line I ever heard. Well, I don't know. Is this the worst pickup line? Someone in a restaurant calls the waiter over and says, "Do you have a to-go box?" And the waiter comes back with a to-go box, and the girl says, "You're not going to fit in there." And the guy just went bright red and sort of walked away. It didn't really work, did it?